Welcome back to Can You Believe That? I'm the Car Wizard from YouTube fame, and I'm also here with Thomas Durant, the paranormal slash cryptid guru.
Well, paranormal for sure, all things paranormal, ufology, cryptids, you name it. We've talked about it. And in fact, last episode, it ruined a childhood love of mine of Loch Ness Monster. And if you haven't seen that, you got to go back and watch. But apologies for not being in my normal studio because I am on the road working, as happens when you work in television and film. So I've checked into Hotel California. I don't know if I can check out though.
Oh no.
Well, speaking of Hotel California, checking in, checking out, this episode is going to be amazing, right, Wizard?
It is. It's going to be. We've done an episode in the past on Satan, but we never have covered his minions yet.
Yes, the hordes of hell, the legions of doom. That is, in fact, demons.
Well, I definitely have a biblical standpoint of what they are or who they are, where they came from, and all the descriptives of that. But I'm really interested in this episode. I've heard about in other cultures. There is in Buddhism, Judaism, there's in Islam, there's demons in all kinds of religions and even cultures all over Earth.
Yeah, it's amazing. And there's consistency sometimes too, which is even crazier.
That's crazy. How does multiple people from multiple walks of life all come together and say these things do exist? They don't agree on how or where or that, but they agree on one thing. They are real.
Yep, and they are real scary too. So that is something they all can universally agree on. But it is funny. We see cases from all over the world, and these cases, depending like from Japan to Europe to here in America, you see these little similar threads that go through the cases, and you're like, oh, okay. So if we are experiencing these things all over, whether we call them different names or not, there's probably something to it, and it's probably all sort of related. That's what I found doing cases, is that there's some underlying themes that kind of thread through different cultures, but then you get some things that just only react to specific cultures that they're known by. So it's a really interesting field. It's very thick and there's a lot of info. So I think we'll probably just start digging in, right, Wizard?
Yeah, I guess I'll start with my biblical descriptions and kind of the story from that viewpoint of what a demon is, where they came from, what they could possibly look like, and all those different things. And then I want to dive in to hear your stories,
Sounds good.
information, whatever it is you have.
Oh, I've got it all. I've got stories, I've got information, and yeah, we can go all out on this one. So what's the Bible say about these demons there, Wizard?
Well, you have to understand from a biblical standpoint, both Satan and his demons originally came from heaven. They haven't always been in hell. They haven't always been these evil entities running around causing chaos, running amok. At one point, they were angels in heaven. In fact, Satan was the most powerful, most beautiful, most awesome creation God had created as far as angels are concerned. And that we go into that with Satan, how he came about in a previous video. You should go watch it if you want to know that story. But they end up in hell. God casts Satan out and a third of the angels with him, not just for a few hundred years, but for eternity. So that's kind of the story, how they got where they're at. The other story is, what do they look like? I'm sure you have stories of things you've seen, but from a biblical standpoint, I have some notes here. I'll go over it. And it gives the descriptions first. What does an angel look like? That was their original form. You know, we think of angels of happy little cherubs, fat, chubby babies, and they're floating around on clouds, but actually angels it accounts for this in the Bible that when they make themselves known or appear in their original form, it actually scares the hell out of people. Even people in the Bible that are God following, people, once they actually see one, they either kneel or they run or they start shaking. It scares the hell out of them, Tommy.
Yeah, they should be wearing their yellow or brown pants that day because
Yeah,
when
they
you read
crap
these
themselves.
descriptions, my goodness, they are terrifying.
It says some angels had wingspans of 8 feet. Some had 4 wings. that looked like the hands of a man. And it says Ezekiel saw not only four wings, they also had four faces. And some of them account that they are covered in eyes all over their body, just like eyeballs everywhere.
That's creepy. And I don't even like people looking at me on the street. I can't imagine having an angel staring at me with like 1,000 eyeballs.
Yeah, and then lastly, a description it gives, some of them, it says that they look kind of like rings within rings, and all the rings are spinning wheels or something. It's really strange.
Yeah, and we'll do a whole angelology episode at some point and get into deeper description about this. But all hands down, we're not pretty looking people. The only ones that ever seem to be pretty looking, from my understanding, wizard in the Bible, are the ones who were messengers to come deliver messages to the humans in a sort of human form.
Yeah, and that may be a form they chose to not bring fear, not to cause issue or alarm with them. And their true form, I believe, that is something that our brains can't even computate or process. That's what's so scary about it. It doesn't make any sense to our natural world. And we look at it and we're like, how? But hey, how did? And then we're like, I don't even know what the hell that is.
I've had days like that too. I totally understand. But yes, there's some things that are just so beyond our comprehension. Maybe we aren't supposed to remember how we see these things, or maybe it just says, this is so weird. These are little pieces I'm going to put together so that you have some idea something happened, but what is it really?
And I think if a person were to say a prayer to God and say, show me an angel, I want to know what it looks like. I think even if you were to go back in time and visit with Jesus and say, show me what they look like, I think he would say it's of no concern of yours because your brain can't even process what you're even looking at. Yeah. So stop worrying about it.
I'd say that's some good advice from God there.
Yeah. So I have a few scriptures I'll go over, kind of the idea of where they came from. It says in Revelation 12:4, says, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to earth. And the dragon stood, the dragon being Satan, and the stars, which is his followers, to earth. I don't know if earth is hell or if they're just here on earth. And it says in Revelation 12:9, it says when the great dragon was cast out, he was cast out with his angels onto earth. So a third of the angels is kind of what I understood in the story that went with him. These angels that with Satan became what we now know as biblical demons. They too were angels at some point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's kind of a description from a biblical standpoint of where they came from, what they look like, and how they got here.
That's super interesting, Wizard. And you're right. Like, there's a lot of what we know about demons comes from the Abrahamic faith. So Islam, Christianity, Judaism. So, I mean, Judaism, not so much. They kind of didn't adopt the demon thing until later, but obviously Islam has the jinn, which are these powerful beings that were made from smokeless fire and kind of rivaled the angels. And just like in the story of Lucifer kind of being jealous of humanity, the jinn were like, whoa, wait, you made these things out of clay. They're kind of fragile and dumb. So maybe we're going to show you how fragile and dumb they are. That's a very oversimplification, but that's essentially a piece of that puzzle. And then, for us with the demons, like, yeah, it's interesting that when we do these cases, the demons, at least in the Abrahamic faith side of things, when we run into Judeo-Christian demons, they refer to themselves as we. It's always we, us. Mm-hmm. It's almost like that band of fallen angels that came down together all just see themselves as one entity altogether. And even like the idea of Legion, which is a well-known demon. Yeah. Legion is a group of demons that have congregated into a horde and try to, wreak havoc or possess people. So I always found that fascinating. It's like, oh, they're like a little ecosystem in and of themselves. But I can understand maybe from the Christian perspective that if they were cast out of heaven together because of their backing Satan, or backing Lucifer at the time, that maybe they just see themselves as this was a group decision. We're in this together. We're all partnering up. And, I would say I respect it, but they're demons. So I don't think I can respect that.
No.
I just want to avoid it, actually. Demons are such a interesting subject because the nice thing about it is you have these clearly defined rules and guidelines that come with them. So, in terms of like when I'm doing cases, there's steps to how these things manifest and how they interact with us and how they're able to interact with us. So you always have the invitation is the first thing. And in the invitation, it's somebody gets a knock at the door and they open it, there's no one there. Or they decide they're going to use a Ouija board, which we can talk about Ouija boards in a whole episode of its own. But the idea being you're inviting some sort of conversation with the entity, and that gives it access to you. And by the way, for you ghost hunters out there, EVP sessions, very similar to Ouija board sessions. Is there a difference? I don't actually believe there is. So just like a Ouija board session, I always end my EVP sessions by closing out the ritual of trying to interact with the deceased by saying, okay, we end the session. Thank you for your time. We absolutely disconnect ourselves from you and any energies we've interacted with. It's like closing a ritual. When you do the Ouija board, you're always supposed to move the planchette to goodbye to end the ritual. And most people don't do that. And then that's when I get a phone call to go in and help them out. So yes, these are very similar things, but that's all part of the invitation. And even invitation can stem to things like, making a pact with a demon or Satan or whatever, because you want to get famous, or you want to get money, you want to be wealthy. You think, oh, maybe it's not real, but maybe it'll help, like power of intention, make me really powerful CEO or executive. And so you do that, and then it happens. And you're like, well, was it that or was it this? Doesn't matter. You've still made the invitation, and likely something is still going to be coming around you. So that's the start of it. Then the next step you have is infestation. It's a subtle game. It's how they kind of come in and start doing small things to try to just feed off of your energy and the fear, and it's almost always confused with just like a normal haunting or something minor, or just even forgetfulness. Like, oh, I thought I put my keys here, but they're not there anymore. They're over here. Or, oh, this thing I had, I lost it. Or, oh, this crucifix I had just fell off the wall. Let me put that back. Small things that start to build over time. And then the entity will start finding the person in the household that it wants to gravitate to and wants to start using as a food source, for lack of a better term. And then we get to the oppression stage. And so oppression, a single person is being isolated and targeted by the entity. And what we've noticed in our cases is people will have mood changes. Usually they become kind of depressive, or they'll have outbursts of anger suddenly. A lot of times they will start isolating themselves from people in the household, their friends and family. They'll also change their diet. So they'll start eating more sugary foods that aren't as good for them, but you don't necessarily see them gaining a whole bunch of weight. They'll really just do things that are not good for their well-being in general, like not going outside and getting vitamin D, not really like interacting in positive ways or meaningful ways with people. So all these things add up and begin to tank the person's immune system, tank their health, and make them susceptible for the next step, which is possession. And that is where things get very dangerous for everyone involved very fast. That's the hardest thing to break. So generally the cases I do, we get called in by the infestation and oppression phases, and we can, try to reverse what happened. But I have had a few cases of possession, and it is probably the most terrifying thing imaginable, because you'll be talking to a person and 1 minute they're one person and the next minute they're someone completely different, which you're like, oh, that's psychosis. Well, we did work with therapists and people that were classically trained with PhDs in psychology. So it wasn't always just psychosis. Some of these people were exhibiting some really strange things, whether they were talking in old languages, whether their eyes were turning colors in front of us, like actually the iris is turning colors, not just the pupils dilating. We had people knowing things about us that nobody should have known. And we talked about this in one of our earlier episodes where, when they do these things, they say these things to shame you. And that's how you know it's not just psychic abilities and a medium talking to a deceased relative, because it's all stuff that's meant to shame and make you feel awful about yourself, because it's bringing down your defenses and it's feeding the entity more. And that's the goal. Like these things, at least from the demonic perspective, they just want to feed off of us because we are essentially just a battery source for them. And I think it also goes back to what Wizard's saying, where there's this sort of dislike of us because we were sort of God's chosen. And I may not have the same beliefs as Wizard here, but the idea of the jealousy that these entities have, I have seen in some of our cases.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It kind of jives with kind of the things that I believe. And I guess something I'll add to it is, why are they here? And it's just like you just mentioned. They God called, in the biblical perspective, God called humankind his greatest creation of all time. And that, I think that really pissed off Satan and his followers. And they were like, oh, you know what? I'm going to show you that they're actually not. And I've got all the time in the world. I'm going to take these beings that you've made and I'm going to crash as many of them as I can into the ground and show you they're not as great as you thought they were. And that's kind of what's going on. And one thing that corroborates with what you just said, Tommy, is that I agree with you that in the spirit world, from a God or Jesus perspective, is they wrote rules
Uh-huh.
that even angels and demons have to follow.
Yeah.
You think, well, demons can do whatever they want. They're away from God. They don't. I mean, they're on their own now. No, every action that they do, even Satan himself, is subject to God's laws. Just like the laws of physics, the laws of nature, you don't just go rewrite them. They're there and they're concrete.
Yeah.
So just like you mentioned, there's steps involved where they slowly work their way in. And like you mentioned with opening a door, it's not like physically open a door. You can mentally open doorways. I believe personally it can be done with illegal drugs, where you normally would have never opened those doors, but now you're not in the right mind. You start opening things up and things start happening and your life goes downhill, just like you mentioned, that decreased health, decreased uh, isolation. The isolation goes along with what's called divide and conquer.
Yeah. Yeah,
They want to
exactly.
cut the people out of your life so it's now just you, nobody else. Nobody's there to help you. You've cut them all out of your life, and now you have no defense. That definitely corroborates with that. But I'm really interested with what your experiences are, or what you've heard or learned about demons in like African cultures,
Oh, yeah.
or I've heard stories about those that there are demons, but it has nothing to do with the Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, most of my cases have revolved around the Judeo-Christian demons and several Jinn cases, which those are some of the most terrifying things I've ever had to deal with because they're so old and so powerful. But I would say that I've had a few cases that were pretty bizarre and fell outside of my belief system for sure, and caused me to have to really dig in and do more research and get knowledgeable on things. So, prime example is we were doing a case with a family here in California, where not in this town or not in this hotel, but in California where I'm currently at. And the family was having issues with an entity. And so, as we were doing our diagnosis, is what I'll call it, where we test different things out after giving the family a safe place to go to where they're not going to get affected while we're there and hopefully not have repercussions after we leave. We give them their safe space and then we go in and we test things out to determine what we think's happening. Well, part of that protocol is doing some Latin scripture reading.
Mm-hmm.
And during one of those scripture readings, we got a very interesting EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. And this was my buddy Dave Harvey, who does a lot of cases with me. He was the one who actually picked it up on his recorder. And it literally says, priestly Latin does not work. And that's when you're like, oh, well, I mean, you know what
Wow.
Latin is. Priestly Latin is obviously I'm reading prayers, right? So this thing knew about it, but it wasn't affecting it negatively. It wasn't like it was in anguish hearing me, invoke the name of God and Jesus. It was just there, and it seemed almost like kind of laughing at us. So
Mm-hmm.
we did eventually change our approach. And one of the things we caught on that particular case was an old dialect of Hindi that was specifically from northern India. And
Mm.
after our research, we determined that what we were dealing with was something called a Rakshasa, which is, I would almost call it like the Djinn of the Hindu religious world. It's known to have some shape-shifting abilities and very primal entity. So we started changing our approach to land within that belief system. Obviously, like the idea of the Rakshasa, under the foot of Brahma. So we went all in on that and we noticed a huge change. And
Mm.
the people who were living there were becoming happier. They were having less activity. So it did work. It took time, but we were able to give them tools to help them get out from underneath it. Then another case that, again, Dave Harvey was on, and several other investigators I worked with have come out on this one. There's a case where we were dealing with a family originally from England and had moved to the States. And I'll tell you, I never believed fairies were real. I'm like that guy who's just, that's just folk tale. It's nonsense, fairy tale BS, not a real thing. Unfortunately, here we are in 2025, and I'm going to tell you, yeah, fairies are real. And
Wow.
I can only explain it because we had this case, and they had incidents where they felt like they were having pricking and burning sensations. So, of course, we're thinking first, like, okay, is this psychological or is this physical? And if it's physical, is it like a thing like they're having some sort of allergic reaction because they just moved here from somewhere else? So they might be having allergies that are causing these feelings. So it was pretty complex. And we worked this case over the course of well over a year and a half, I think, maybe 2 years. And during one of the investigations, Dave, my poor buddy Dave, ended up, while we were doing one of our diagnosis sessions, felt like he got bit by something.
Oh.
And he looked down on his arm, and there was a red mark right there that came out of nowhere. Wasn't there before. So it happened while we were in the room, and there was that sensation of the little pricks happening where you're like, ooh, ow, it's like pincushion time. Dave and I found a book from the 16th century of a priest who had written about running into elves and fairy folk in Ireland. This book started to describe exactly what we were experiencing. And it was all about the fairy folk and how they would come in and manipulate people and cause havoc and take them to their dimension. And it's like, you know, this is terrifying stuff, but I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
That is crazy.
Some of the stuff that was in that book and some of the stuff we were then able to research that surrounds fairy lore is what we used to try to clear the house out from these entities. And sure enough, it worked. Like things that, I mean, crazy stuff. Like we bought a huge thing of bellows and cedar smoke and whole 9 yards, all things within a belief system I knew nothing about and hadn't known before. But that's the takeaway here. Demons across any culture, any belief system, they exist for a reason. God allows them for a reason, right?
Right.
Well, everyone's going to have their own opinion on what that is. For me, the opinion is, it seems like every time I get involved in a case that's very serious, that the people involved have a choice to make. Are they going to become victims, and are they going to let themselves succumb to this sort of darkness? Or do they rise up? Do they find faith? Do they find whatever religion or belief system that fits them? Do they find a renewed love of their family, a renewed love of themselves? Do they find themselves eating better? Do they find themselves being healthier? Do they find themselves taking a path in life that isn't about money or fame or whatever? It's more about family, friends, and fun. These are the things that I see happen. And I've had cases where people have completely turned their lives around. You wouldn't even know that's the same person. And it's all because they had this interaction with the darkness that then helped them to find their light to move forward. And so I always go back to the idea of the Shayateen, which is, you know, where the name Satan came from. The Shayateen were adversaries or advocates. And going back to our Satan episode, I still believe in the advocate theory, which is it's terrible what happens. I don't wish demonic infestation or oppression or possession on anyone. But the people that endure and then can get themselves through it or work with somebody to get them through it, those people tend to go and live fuller lives, happier lives, or find something that they were missing in their life. And sometimes that's God.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And kind of a little different on the last statement you just made, that I believe that these things exist. They're evil. They were cast out of heaven because they couldn't conform or they wouldn't follow the rules or whatever. For whatever reason, God allowed free will at heaven at some point. And he said at this point forward, they will no longer have free will, these creatures that are in heaven right now. But God uses them, just like you mentioned, to kind of purify people. When God releases them onto someone, they find a way through, they find a deity, they find a path through, and they become a better person or have a more fulfilling life they've ever had Or the opposite can happen. It absolutely devastates the person and they die in that state of
Yeah.
failure and sin.
Yeah. It's pretty scary.
Kind of like God says, the rules are if they choose to follow me, you're done. I'm going to open up the door for me. If they choose to follow or go the wrong way, kill them, or take them down, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Can I counter that though, real quick, Wizard? I mean,
sure.
I understand what you're saying. I do want to throw one case at you. That's a pretty famous case. And that's the case of Anaisa Michelle. She basically died during rites of exorcism because she was under possession. Now, with Anaisa Michelle, they made a movie called The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And it's one of my favorite films of all time because I think it's the most perfect adaptation of what it's like to deal with demonic forces in our real world, right? But one of the things that Anaisa Michelle had come to when she was enduring this suffering, and I mean, suffering is an understatement with what this poor woman went through. She felt in a vision from God that she was told this was a way to show the world that demons are real and to show people there's still a way to be redeemed and to find God and to find religion. And again, even though that's not the religion I follow, I think that message is a beautiful message. And I think we would be remiss to just say everyone who's attacked by demons deserves it. I think that some people have these things happen. And again, it can be a beautiful change in their life. But if they don't, maybe it's a situation like Anaisa Michelle, who died to show people that these things really do exist and to remind people why faith exists.
Yeah, to bring in an awareness to it's not a game, it's not a fairy tale. Thinking about, you just talked about fairies, but it's not something that it's a wives' tale children's story.
Yeah.
I believe that they're real, and you've seen with evidence in your investigations that they're real.
Yes.
But one last thing I'll say about them is that it's like if you walk into a herpetologist, a person who collects snakes or lizards or whatever, they have 12 cages full of king cobras and black mambas, caged up, safely locked away. You walk into that room, can those snakes hurt you? No, not at that moment. And it stays that way until you start opening doors and opening things, and these things come out. Now they can hurt you, and you opened the door. So I think that those are things that can really, we talk about it in the past, where if you're doing Ouija board sessions or if you're doing investigations, there's a certain person on certain ghost shows that goes taunting and show me your power or show me what you got, and you just open that door and you don't realize it.
Yeah. Sorry, my black shirt's not tight enough to match his. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So just walking down the street, a demon would love to probably take you out. They can't. There's rules, there's laws. Until you start crossing those lines or opening those doors, then it can get really bad. So like Tomy said, if you're doing Ouija board sessions or doing any kind of things like that, rituals, you have to close it out. You have to be done, because if you don't, you just leave a door wide open. It's dangerous.
Yeah, it's incredibly dangerous. But there's also so in the occultism path, a lot of times hermetic occultists or chaos mages or people in various forms of magical practice, part of what is taught through the lineage is, oh, you're supposed to conjure demons in order to learn how to banish them, or you can conjure them and control them. First off, to me, that's a lot of human ego, right?
It is.
When I do cases, it's not me doing the work. I am just simply here to lend my knowledge and my body as a vessel for that to do the work, for God, for whatever, greater power is out there. Anyone who comes in as God's gunslinger is like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to shoot them demons. It's like, no, you are not going to do that, because it's not about you. It's about being present and providing a way for God or whomever to work through you to help this family or this person get to the better place they need to be, or to become the person they need to become. Not about me, not about you. Part of it is like conjuring and banishing. I don't do that. I will not conjure anything to just simply try to banish it, because these things are older than we are. They've been watching humanity for millennia. They know us better than we know us.
Yes.
So how do I think I'm going to outsmart something that knows me better? I don't.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tomy, that people conjure forth one of these things thinking they can control it. They know you, just like you just said, Tomy. better than your own mother. They know you better than you could ever imagine. They know you, they can actually predict what you're about to do and how you're going to do it.
Yep.
And I think that when someone's that arrogant and has that kind of an ego that they're 40 years old, 30 years old, and they're going to outthink and outsmart this thing, I think when they conjure it up, they probably go to get permission from the higher power and saying, I really want to show this person that they're wrong. I want to take this person down. I want to show them otherwise. And I think the higher power, sometimes the higher power can say, their arrogance has really opened this door, so have at it.
Yep.
And then you really are in trouble.
Yeah. And it can get real scary real fast, which sometimes is good because some people need, just like in anything in life, right? Sometimes learning the hard way is the only way some people learn. Like I've seen that happen time and time again. It's unfortunate that some people haven't done anything so bad. They've just been dealt kind of a bad hand in life and had a lot of trauma, and that can open the door. But I've also seen that turn into something very beautiful where they're able to overcome things, and you can really change your life for the better and find a better path for you moving forward. But it also can be hard. And I know people sometimes fall into the lazy category and don't want to put in effort, and they want somebody to come in, wave a magic wand, literally, and fix it for them. But it just doesn't work that way. Like you have to take part in your own salvation, and however that looks for you is how that looks for you. And, you know, my job is to just facilitate that and help put people on a path that I think brings them closer to a God, a deity, or a positive, loving force.
Yeah. And one thing that I think you could probably corroborate with me on is the truth is, even if you go in there with the approval of deity, it could take a year.
Yeah.
It could take 2 years, 6 months. It could take 3 years to work through all of this. You don't call an exorcist or someone who investigator or something, and they just, boom, you're fixed now.
Nope.
It can take a while.
Yeah, even with exorcisms, like the rite of exorcism being a very Catholic tradition. I know most Christians do more like deliverance prayer circles, things of that nature. But with an exorcism rite, you're talking about something that in order to break pretense, you're in ritual with the person and with other people, other clergy, your family members, up to like 24, 32, 36, 50 hours straight with no rest. Most of the time, these priests are fasting because that's part of the ritual. And they're just trying to get the demon to admit that it's a demon versus it's the person. And a lot of times now they have psychologists or they'll have doctors in the room during these things to ensure that they know what's a real world problem versus what's a metaphysical world problem, right? So, it's a really tedious thing, but breaking that pretense is important. But even once you do that, these exorcisms may go on, like you do one here, and then you do one a few months later, then another few months later, and it takes all that preparation every single time. And even with us, it's not just we come in and we're done. It's we come in, we're counseling people, we're talking to them, we're trying to dig through a person's entire life history to find out what was the thing that caused this to start, whether it was when they were a child, whether it's when they were adult, whether it's an interaction with somebody who was an occultist or a witch, or whether it was somebody who just happened to pick up the wrong thing at the wrong time from the wrong place and had something attached to it. Where did this all start? Why did it start? And that's, something that can take a really long time to figure out. So I just ask, if you're out there and you're having issues with demonic forces or malevolent non-human forces, number one is you're going to have to be patient, because the people who can help you are likely going to be the ones that it'll take longer, but they're also probably not going to charge you money. Like I don't believe in taking money for any of the cases I do. Always have done it pro bono, because in my mind, God doesn't want me doing this for anything, right? So finding people that don't take money for it, finding people that don't talk like they're going to come in and solve your problems in a day, because those are not necessarily people that understand the reality of what's happening. You want people that will help you dig into the root cause of why this particular entity is attached to you and doing the things it's doing. And, simply, you just want somebody who has your best interests at heart and isn't looking to exploit you or your entity for fame. So if they want to live stream your house, don't do it. If they want to live stream an exorcism, don't go to those people. Like those aren't the right people. They're just spreading more of the Johnny Appleseed of the demonic out there to the world. Like you want people that legitimately want to be a person who's there to help you figure this out, to become strong again, and to release yourself from the bondage of these entities. So at the end of the day, I just want to remind people, this stuff is going to happen. It's going to be terrifying, especially if you let it go on for a long period of time. You'll get hopeless. You'll feel like you're just surrounded in darkness, but there's good people out there who want to help. There's always, whatever faith you're drawn to, that positive, benevolent, loving being is always there for you. And just focus on those things and start working your way out of the darkness one step at a time. And just know we're all forgivable for any of the transgressions we've done. So as long as you're aware and you're willing to make the changes you need to in your life, there is hope.
There is always hope. That's correct. So that shows that there's options when these things start to happen. We've proven that they exist. These things called demons, they exist in multiple cultures, not just in Judaism or Christianity or the Abrahamic faiths. And Tommy's brought up some really good ideas on options, that there's help that could be sought after, or you can find a way out.
Yeah.
One thing I want to really show you guys or talk to you guys about, and Tommy will probably agree, is don't play with snakes. Yeah. Don't play with fire. Don't play with knives. Don't play with demons.
Yeah.
Don't conjure them. Don't think you're going to get ahead in life. Like he mentioned, where you can get fame or money or become larger than life or whatever. It never works in your favor. Ever, ever, ever. So again, thanks guys for watching. And also, if you have any questions or anything, let us know in the comments. We always like to answer your questions if we get time. And that brings to mind, Tommy, do we have any questions right now?
Well, sir, we actually do have a couple of questions that we can share. And
Okay.
One is actually right up our alley here tonight. Let's get this question in from our favorite return questioner, question person, someone who asks us a lot of great questions, and that's Gemalot. Gemalot back again.
Gemalot.
So Gemalot asks us once again, does the Bible suggest that spirits seen today are either angelic or demonic, not human, since human spirits return to God? And then they quote Ecclesiastes 12:7. Man,
Ecclesiastes.
That would be the word. Yeah. So they quote 12:7 saying, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it, which that's a beautiful line. I like that, actually.
I can answer that. Spirits are these creatures God created, angels, which some of them became demons, like we talked about just in this episode today. And then there's humans, which we've talked about in episodes in the past. Me and Tommy would both agree that we're kind of like a meat suit with a spirit attached to us. There was always the spirit, but then now we're attached to a body. The body dies, and like in that verse you just read, when the body dies, the spirit returns to heaven. The angels that are in heaven, they don't go to heaven. They're already there. The demons that have been cast out will never, ever come back to heaven, ever. And us here on earth, when our physical body dies, our spirit will return wherever, that is deemed that you be returned to. So that kind of answers it on my end. What do you think, Tommy?
Because this was a Bible question, I think your answer is perfect. I don't really have much more to add other than, do I think that our human spirits go back to source? Yeah, I do think so. But I also believe in reincarnation, and I know that's kind of contradictory, but that's just my personal belief. In terms of angels and demons, I kind of ascribe to the idea that they're from their own dimensions, like whether you say that's heaven for the angels and hell for the demons, or maybe it's just some other existence. There seems to me some differentiating factors between those two things, whether that's after fall or has always been that way. I don't know. I'm just a human. But, I think the idea is, these things have their own realms. We have our own realm. And while we coexist here on Earth, sometimes because of things that happen like demonic infestation or an angelic visage, because, God's saying, hey, you got work to do. I just think we're in this melting pot, so to speak, of different entities, because, I'm also of the same belief that there's extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings that exist too, as we talked about in our previous episodes. So I leave it open. I'll find out probably when I'm dead. I think that's about as good as it's going to get for me.
All right. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, we have one more question.
Okay.
This one's from Guillermo Gonzalez Quintero 3035. And Guillermo asks us this question. A question about this device, and I think they mean the chronovisor or Kozyrev mirror because it came from that episode, is how do you identify who you are watching and also whose POV is shown on the holograms? They're a little confused, and I understand. It was confusing to me too, researching the episode. So I think that's the chronovisor. Now, the chronovisor, for those who didn't watch it, please go watch the episode on time travel because you're going to want to see that. It's pretty good. And
It is.
there was a device that was owned by the Vatican that saw through time. And the way that the person who had built it, Father Ernetti, said that it looked like holograms in black and white. Now, from what I can tell you, he saw these black and white holograms not as if looking through someone's eyes, but just seeing around the person they were targeting in almost a 3D stereoscopic view, but not quite because it was on a cathode ray tube television. And so there was no like point of view. It was just, here's what's happening, almost like watching a TV show. So that's the way he described it. Again, I don't know how true it is. We don't even know if any of it's true, but it seemed pretty interesting. And we thought, hey, if we're going to talk about time travel, this is one of the more fascinating aspects that I just don't think a lot of people have dug into. So that's why we brought that up. But in terms of how everything was seen, they used the tuner to find the person, and then they were basically watching from some sort of abstract third-person view is how it was described. So I hope, Guillermo, that answers your question. And that is all the questions we have for today in this episode.
All right. Well, if you haven't watched our previous videos, definitely go check them out. If you're new to the channel, we have tons of videos that we've made and lots of topics we've already covered. We have so many more topics to come yet. So again, if you have questions, leave them in the comments and we will get to them when we can. We like you guys' questions. We like you guys' comments. We also enjoy doing this channel for you guys we can talk together about all these topics without fighting, without arguing, without putting people in their place. You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. That's not how we operate here. So if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button, and here's to many more videos on the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm the Car Wizard, and that is Tommy, the Paranormal Guru.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching.